Welcome to The Homeless Conservative. My name is Blake Fisher, and this is my podcast where I talk to other sort of curious and politically exhausted citizens like myself about conservative issues. So thanks for joining me. Again, a few housekeeping things. Would love if you subscribe to the podcast wherever you watch or listen to podcasts. You can watch this podcast on YouTube and Spotify and listen about everywhere else. Also, if there's things you disagree with or you want to chat about, I'm all for a friendly discussion. Don't call my guests names, though. I'm not into that. I will block you immediately. You can call me names, though. That's fine. It hurts my wife's feelings, but not so much mine. So you can do that in the comments of YouTube. You can do that. There's a question and answer thing in Spotify to interact there. You can also just email me, blake@thehomelessconservative.com. Also, I'm on Instagram at thehomelessconservative. Still not quite diving back into Twitter. I have a Twitter account. I don't know if I'm going to do that quite yet. I still haven't decided if I want to dive back into that dumpster fire. So anyway, today I talked to my buddy Jacob specifically about a Wall Street Journal poll that showed Americans' interest in or belief that things are important like patriotism, having children, religion, sort of these things that used to be sort of staples of American life, and sort of a pretty steep decline over the last 20 years, according to this poll. I think the poll's probably a little flawed based on how quickly that decline went over the course of 3 years. I think they probably have some bad polling data, but still the trend, generally not good, how all of those have gone down, except for I think money was the only one that people considered more important to them than it was a few years ago. So we talk about that, and then a lot of other things, honestly, most of which I cannot remember what we talked about because it was weeks ago, and I have slept since then. But not enough because I have small children. And so, so enjoy the episode, and thanks for listening or watching, and please, comment, send me an email, tell me what you think, and we'll try to, I think the sort of form idea here is going to be, I'm going to release these conversational podcasts on Tuesdays. I'm going to try to do like a newsy sort of wrap-up conversation with someone on Fridays, and in that conversation, I will bring up some of your comments and or emails or whatever from the Tuesday conversation, what you think I got wrong. Like I said, just be kind. You can disagree without being disagreeable, I think, is the classic. Seems like one of those things that we had on the wall in elementary school, right? And those cheesy motivational posters. Anyway, here's the episode with Jacob. All right, Jacob. So tell me, where you align politically? Do you consider yourself like a conservative, far right? I don't know, Republican? Do you hate everything? I don't know. Where are you at today?
Sometimes I hate everything.
It depends on what minute of the day it is. Yeah.
If I'm reading the news, usually if I'm on Twitter, I hate everything.
Yeah, which is why I'm not on Twitter anymore. Because
You're smarter than
Although
me.
I would have had a great tweet today, by the way. Yeah. But we'll save that for later.
Okay. I get it's cyclical for me. I'll jump on Twitter and I'm like, this is it. I'm finally going to do it. I'm going to commit myself, and it'll be a week of incessant checking and posting and thinking. And then I move on to something else. Right. The ADD brain takes me off. So
that's how it goes.
Anyways, Jacob Weaver.
Yep.
I'm an entrepreneur, business guy, grew up in a Christian family. I feel like I'm kind of at least at face value, the archetypical white conservative guy.
Yeah.
But, I would say I'm fairly moderate in my views on things. I'm registered as a Republican, and I vote Republican. I did vote for Donald Trump, but
fine.
I think
both elections, 2016 and 2020.
So I didn't vote the first one.
That's fine.
Anyways,
I'm not judging at all.
It is one of those things. I think you should get out there and vote. But
I think sometimes not voting though is fine. I mean, I didn't vote for president in either one of them.
Okay. It was a bit of a protest. I got very concerned prior to the last election, and that really caused me to get involved. And so, and we talk about that. But I think for the most part, I am right aligned in my views. I hold a lot of the traditional kind of Judeo-Christian values.
So you're a rhino.
Yeah, maybe. I guess so.
No, I'm just kidding. I mean, this is what everyone labels anything that's was popular 10 years ago, and all of a sudden it's like, no, sorry, we're not for that anymore.
No, I think I believe in the broad middle And I think more people, even if you're affiliated with a specific party, more people need to feel comfortable having viewpoints that span the aisle.
Yeah.
And it feels like what we get so much of is this narrative that's incredibly polarized. If you share your view on you're anti-abortion, you get lumped into everything else. And so...
Well, there's no, part of the reason I wanted to start this thing is because my biggest problem with all politics and media now is there's zero nuance.
Right.
Zero. It's like this big sort of you are either in this camp or this camp. There's no third camp.
Right.
It's just like you either have to be, abortion's a great thing. It's like you either have to be all the way on one side or all the way on the other. And you end up with, the popular narrative being like, you've got some people that are like cheering on 33-week abortions. And you're like, that's not where this started, and that's not where most of the country is. And you've got another side that wants to put people in jail if they have an abortion. It's kind of like, I don't think that those are representative of probably 80%, 90% probably of the country.
Yeah.
But that's what everyone thinks the sort is. You have to be in one of those two camps.
And that's kind of what gets me frustrated a lot of the time is there's this daisy chain of logic, or I wouldn't call it logic. People think it is, where, someone will say, I'm a registered Democrat. I care about women's rights.
Yeah.
And so because of that, I believe this. And well, if I believe, if I believe in pro-choice across the board, regardless of nuance, like you said, then I probably also believe this. And then you end up with this thing that's really important, like women's rights. I believe in women's rights. I'm married to a woman. I have 2 daughters.
Right.
But then we get all the way out here, like in wacky land, where we're talking about, these crazy obscure pronouns, and everyone has authority. Everyone has value. It's all equal. It's all whatever. And
or the assumption that if you are on the other side, if you're a conservative or Republican, you must be anti-women.
For sure. Yeah.
Which you try to bring that up. It's like, well, what about Republican women? And it's like, well, they've been, I don't know, brainwashed. Then you're like, so you're saying those women are too dumb to, it doesn't make any sense.
Now, you got to look this way. And just to be clear, everyone does have value. I think it's just, it's kind of this flattening of all things to where every opinion matters. Every voice can be heard just as much as the other. And I'm not actually a complete proponent for giving everyone a microphone and saying, speak your truth into the airwaves and let's all compete together.
The your truth thing is an interesting thing to me because that's not real. There's no such thing as your truth. There is truth and there's stuff that's not true.
Yeah.
You can't have your truth. It can be your story or your opinion, but you can't be your truth. Like that thing drives me nuts because it's like, that's not an objective thing. Like something is either true or it is not. It can't be true to one person and not true to someone else in the sense of like when we're talking about politics and policy and things like that. It's not, but it's a cop out for you can't argue with me anymore because this is my truth or whatever. And it's like, well, I mean, not really. If it's not, based in actual facts, you can't say that in my opinion. But
you see these memes where they're like talking about the NPCs, and it's kind of like, I think we all have this fantasy that we're playing our own video game.
Right.
And we're all the main character.
Yep.
And everyone else is just kind of existing in our world. And, unfortunately today you can actually live that way without a ton of consequence.
Yeah.
Thousands of years ago, you would be kicked out of the tribe and you would freeze and starve and you wouldn't live very long. But nowadays, no one's kicking you off of TikTok,
No, but they, that isolation, I think is I think that's causing most of the political problems that we have is the people in isolation, which is interesting because then the thing we wanted to talk about on this was the charts you sent me earlier, which we'll put in the show notes if you're listening, and if you're watching, we'll put them on the screen. Yep. But let's pull them up on the iPad so that we can actually look at them and talk about them because that's a good segue into what they said. So you sent me this Washington Post, Wall Street Journal and North Pole, and basically it showed that since 1998, everything, the things that we would talk about would be like patriotism, religion, having children, community involvement, money, all these things. Like everything but money has done this.
There's been a precipitous decline.
Like a huge, well, I guess technically, if we're looking at the video, it goes this way. I mean, just like from 70% in 98 on patriotism to 38% in 23.
That's right.
On religion, 62. So this is percent who say these values are very important to them.
Right.
And so this is just people. This is not this is not split out into parties yet. This is just people in general. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think the charts just show people, American people as a whole.
Yeah.
If you actually go and look at the study from NORC, it breaks it down by age, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, just the idea is, as Americans, our traditional American values have declined. And I do find it interesting on one of those, the community involvement piece. It's the only one that has kind of this peak and then just drops off.
It goes from like 47 to 62 from like, I'd say 98 to 2019. So this chart is really weird because the middle of it is in 2019. And then drops precipitously to 27.
I wonder if so. My thought on that was like maybe that was when COVID hit, and then all of a sudden community involvement
because we couldn't have it,
completely disappeared
because we didn't have it.
And people just realized in isolation, it's like, oh, we don't want to do any of those things again, And it's like it became the new norm to not be engaged, or maybe engagement change. So I do think this is very interesting. I'm excited to talk about it. And I've really, I spent some time today looking at this and trying to come up with some theories as to why we would see these numbers. Because if you look at the actual reporting, the reporting itself within the sample size that they did,
which was like 1,019 adults.
Yeah, relatively
size,
small, evenly distributed. I don't know if it's normal distribution in terms of age and political belief, and et cetera, but just in glancing at it, it was fairly evenly distributed or normally distributed, as you would expect. A thick majority.
Yeah, this doesn't seem like and plus you see all sorts of other polls that show the same kind of declines, just not all together necessarily.
Yeah, so it's like we still seem to, we haven't gone completely insane. But when you look at the numbers, there has been this shift in the values that American people hold. And I wonder why. I mean, there's an obvious change.
Well, I think there's some. Let's just go one by one because I think they're interesting. So patriotism goes from 70% in 98 to 61% in 2019 to 38% in 23. So it just drops like 10%, less than 10% over the course of that 20 years.
Right.
And then just off the cliff from 2019 to 23. I think the problem there is just a redefinition of words.
Yeah,
I think that like people now associate patriotism with nationalism, which I get why people are apprehensive about that. Because even I am like, nationalist is such a weird word because it can mean so many different things to different people. But there's obviously some people that think it means like isolationism, like complete, it's like
frayed jeans, Confederate hats.
And it definitely turns into like, for some people, it's straight up a white supremacy thing. Yeah, like without a doubt, like that's what it is. Now, I don't think that is the cause of it going down to 38%. I also think it's a problem. Trump is the ultimate, he says something and there's a whole group of people that have to go the opposite way. So if he says patriotism is good,
that's right.
There's going to be a whole crew of people, but that doesn't explain why it's at 38% necessarily. Well, that's lower than you would think. It'd be at 50, you would think, if it was just a Trump phenomenon.
To me, and speaking about Trump, it's like, I think about some of the classic media portrayals, and these are real people. I mean, we live in Oklahoma. We're not true South, but like you look at some of the classic, like
it's a red
Trumpers, state. and there's some soggy swamp people.
I think we're the only state, maybe in the country, that was every county was red in both those elections. We might not be the only one. We definitely were in both of those. So
I mean, it's no surprise.
No.
Every election, which like a lot of people say it doesn't matter. But back to the voting, I think it is important. My piece on the patriotism is the media has been waging war for years. I mean, really since this pivot in the numbers. With the inception of Trump's presidency, patriots got branded
a certain way.
Yeah.
Gun-toting, you're right.
Small-minded, low wage, narrow view, racist, bigoted, all of these things. And even to some degree myself, I mean, I felt my views on what that word meant or means changing. And so one thing that really helped is through that time I had a business partner who I would say is an extreme patriot, former Marine. His office was
more so
painted
than I am.
blue.
If you've been in the army.
You know, he's like painted blue, multiple flags, patriot emblazoned on the wall. And for me, that helped me keep things grounded, I think, in that definition of what patriotism means. It doesn't come with all this baggage, or it doesn't have to, at least.
No. Right, but I think that most people are seeing a caricature. Because and the truth is, if you live in a blue state, like, okay, there are states just like Oklahoma that are on the opposite side of the blue side. So if you're in California, you really probably have never met a conservative. Yeah. Just like,
for sure.
Although I don't feel like that's actually the case here. I feel like there are, but even I think most Democrats, I mean, you just look at polling, most people are in that middle chunk of 60% of people. Yeah. There's there's some people that are like hardcore on both sides of the right and the left. And then most people are like, no, I think there's nuance in most stuff. I'm pro this and anti this. And that's why there's like so many more independents. It's just like every election cycle, the number of independents goes up and Republicans and Democrats tend to go down because I think most people are just having trouble identifying where they belong. Because they're like, I can't fit into either one of these buckets that you're forcing me to go into. So I'm just not going to choose either one of them, which is, I think, ironically, how we end up with such bad parties is because if everyone leaves those and doesn't participate in trying to make them better, you end up with just the loons running the nut houses, essentially.
Yeah. And that was, that too, as a slight segue, that was a big piece for me prior to the last election that caused me to really get involved. And the funny thing is, I was listening to a Justin Bieber album.
Okay.
And he has this intermission with Martin Luther King speaking. I think he was like 38 at the time. So he's young and he's giving a speech and he's talking about using your voice and like having an opinion, having values, kind of championing your values. And he's talking about fear, and he says, what are you afraid of? Obviously, he's speaking to people where their lives are on the line, right? So like
people with actual problems.
That's right.
Not that we don't have actual problems, but let's just say the civil rights movement was a bigger deal than us arguing about whatever we argued about on Twitter today.
Absolutely. And so, I think obviously contextually understanding the stakes were so much higher with those people. But, he said something that was powerful that really struck me. I remember where I was driving when I listened to this, and you'd have to go find it and listen to it because he said it more articulately than I could.
We only listened to Baby. My 2.5-year-old loves the song Baby.
Yeah.
And let's listen to that. So that's all the Justin Bieber I know.
We do the Kids Bop, Peach at George's. I got my peaches down.
No, that's a great song too. I do know that one. Okay.
Yeah. But he says something basically along these lines that are like, if you keep your mouth silent, you keep your mouth shut, you're silent on these issues, you may preserve your life. But then when you die down the road, decades later, what will, you'll be burying someone that actually died many years before. And it's kind of that idea has come out in various quotes prior to that. But this idea that if you don't speak up, if you don't actually stand for something, in a lot of ways, you're losing a part of yourself. And so, and really, you see that piece where the people that do speak out most often are the ones that have the most polarized viewpoints. And it was kind of this deal. I had just been viciously attacked in this insane Facebook dialogue. Do you remember this happened? It's right around the GOP gala. I did some plug on Candace Owens, and I had a very liberal friend, Facebook friend, not real friend, who had thought, I guess, I was someone different or something different, and she had put on my quote, or I put up an invite to this Candace Owens thing. Hey, we're gonna go do this thing. She's like, this sounds awesome.
This was, by the way, like the most benign Facebook post. It was like, hey, there's this thing I'm going to. If you want to come to, it'd be great. So it was like not.
She puts this thing up, in my naivety, like I see her. She's like, sounds awesome, LOL, something weird, like, and I was like, that is so odd because I knew she was insane on Facebook. I knew that part.
Right, yeah.
But I had never crossed paths with her. And so I was like, I would not peg her as a Candace Owens follower. But anyways, go to the thing. It's great. I put up a plug. at the end, Candace Owens did a great job reminding us the importance of fatherhood and like something really vague and
pretty benign,
pretty,
just and like being parents.
It turned into the most dramatic, vicious fight where I really fought to be sensitive. And, it was as if this thing that she saw in my Facebook photo, the white bald guy with the suit on, smiling with like Jesus and chess and finance in my, it's like
set her off.
I know.
Like,
she's just like,
did it.
I know exactly who you are, you know, and her and this other guy jumped on my case and it turned into this saga. And I was reeling for a while after that. Part of it was funny. And then it got to this point where I was like, it started emotionally affecting me. And I was like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
And so that paired with Dr. King, listening to that deal, I was like, I have to get involved. And I have to know what I believe in.
Yeah.
And I just don't think skimming the paper, reading the headline, catching a couple tweets is enough to actually develop a core set of beliefs.
No.
And to your point earlier about the parties, it's the same thing where you read the issues point, the talking points on this, and this. Well, that's Republican. So that's why I don't say I'm a Republican. Even though I'm registered as a Republican, I say I'm a conservative because I connect with conservative values.
Hence the name of the podcast being The Homeless Conservative, because it's not, I do care. It's weird. People are kind of two minds about this. I feel like there's a lot of people that have just left the Republican Party, and I don't blame them for what's happened over the last 8 years or so for doing so, because I think it has turned into quite a crap show. Sure. But then again, I've always kind of been like, but how do you expect it to get better if you leave? You know what I mean? Because I get that you want to go whatever, you made your bed, sleep in it.
Yeah.
I get that to some degree, but I'm the guy that wants to make it better somehow. Now I don't. Well, I think it's a steep hill to climb at this point for either party, because I think they've both gone insane
for sure.
With being really captive to their bases, like the furthest wings of their bases, because of the way that we set up the primary systems. They have to be.
You have to be. Yeah.
So like now people in red states and blue states are not scared of losing in the general election. They're scared of losing in a primary.
Right.
They're scared of saying something that pisses off some group that goes and gets someone that they can get their people behind, because it doesn't take that many people to win a primary. You look at the numbers and a lot of these people, especially, not in presidential primaries, but talk about congressional, especially even smaller ones, like state houses, local city councils, things like that. You're talking about people winning primaries with like, a couple thousand votes sometimes.
That's right.
And so you're talking about the smallest minority of not just like conservatives or Republicans. You're talking about the people that decided to show up for a runoff election on the second week of August when school's starting up again. I mean, it's like these things are designed for people to not show up. Right. And so they're just totally captive to, and Democrats are in the same boat with like, it's like teachers unions or whatever it is. And like, they are captive to that audience. And if they piss them off, they're screwed. And so no one's willing to do that anymore. And
you see a lot of people, at least, we're talking about this with Charlie Kirk. And for the most part, I like Charlie. I like some of his views. I think he's he kind of has stepped into this trope or this thing.
It's gotten too performative for me in the sense that it's like, it seems like everything's this own the libs thing. And it just feels like, but you're not persuading anyone.
That's right. Well, even on his podcast, you listen to his podcast and it's just, everything's right here. It's all, it's like, he's kind of, it's like the Dan Bongino thing, like all those guys that get on there and do the radio voice and the hibbity thing. And like my issue with what you're talking about is, and at the end of the day, I think it comes down to fear, because we live in this society of social media now where you can get crucified if you say the wrong thing.
Well, yeah.
You get smeared. You know.
I've been on that and I didn't even say the wrong thing. Do you remember when the...
Oh, yeah. I do remember
this dude, named Blake Fisher in Iowa shot like a baboon or something in Africa on a safari, and like he was the game and wildlife guy in Iowa, and like Ricky Gervais and some other people, I guess, decided like this guy was the villain of Twitter that day, right. But he spelled the same way as my name. And so everyone just started attacking me. This guy didn't have a Twitter account.
You're getting like death threats.
Yeah, I was getting literally there were people saying just the worst thing. I mean, they were saying, we hope someone strings your family up, hangs them by a tree, all this stuff. And I'd be like, hey, I'm not that guy. And they'd be like, oh, sorry. I'm like, no, that doesn't excuse what you just said. If I was the right guy, it'd still be terrible that you said you wanted his family to be murdered. That's crazy.
You're
right?
feeding the fire, man.
But it was kind of perfect because I was like laid over in an airport for 8 hours. Our flights were delayed. So it was kind of the perfect time to be bored on Twitter and get attacked. But it was not fun. And I was not, I mean, it was a little fun, but it was weird. It would not have been cool if it would actually have been me and people. I mean, like I said, I could diffuse most of the situations by telling people that you're an awful person for the things you said. But yeah, it's like that. I feel like that's all a lot of those kind of characters are doing. It's like they're just picking the nuttiest person on the left or the nuttiest story or whatever the thing is. And
but the system is built, though, to reward that persona. And that's the issue that I have. And I think to the point earlier about kind of believing, speaking out for what you believe in. Yeah. First, you have to know what you believe in. And I think it just takes a modicum of interest and effort to actually get in and know those things, work on those things. But the other piece too, and I feel this myself, there's kind of this false idea that I've run into, I've encountered myself, which is like, I have to be fully rounded on all issues, on all things, and be able to articulate and define exactly what I believe in. And really, at 35, I have it all figured out, And it's like, probably because we're in this punitive society where you say the wrong thing, you get crucified. Yeah. People aren't willing to get out there and experiment and speak and try things on or
be wrong about something or change your mind on something. I think that's the everyone seems to be able to repeat the bullet points that they get fed via whatever media source. I think most media in the big sense is terrible. I think that all cable news is junk now. There's literally almost nothing redeemable about any of it because it's literally just going after a small sliver of base. It's just ratings. It's just money. There's almost no intent. I'm not saying there's no good journalists at these places, but they're not after 5 p.m. for sure. So, I mean, maybe if you're watching it during the daytime, you're getting a little bit better out of it. But I mean, people complain about Fox News all the time, and I think it's worth complaining about. But MSNBC is doing the exact same thing, just to the left. It's not. It's like, and these people that are kind of like switching hats between opinion and news, and so it's really hard to tell where the line is. Like, I think it's crazy that like you turn on election coverage. And it'll be like Rachel Maddow and Keith Olbermann, or I guess he's not there anymore. I don't know where he is anymore. He's in some obscure place. But it'd be like Brian Williams and Rachel Maddow, and it's like, no, you can't have those two. Like, you need news people or you need opinion people. Like, these people that kind of switch the hats back and forth. To me, it's super deceptive about the way that they. And if people are getting there. Most people now are just like focusing on one of those. So, I mean, like, the charts don't show this, but I mean, I think the other reason most of those things are down is because I think everyone thinks everything's bad. Yeah. Because almost everything is just a negative polarization. So everything on Fox News is just about how crazy the left is. Mm-hmm. It's really not ever calling out their own side. It's not really even, I mean, I don't know if the GOP has a platform right now other than being anti-Democrat.
Yeah, I don't know.
And you look at the polls on people, basically they're voting against the other guy. So like everyone that voted for Trump in 2016, for the most part, the reason was because they didn't want to see Hillary Clinton in the White House, right? Yeah. And vice versa. I mean, they were the most hated candidates in the history of the United States as far as two people in one thing. Like, it was like 67%. I think it was 67 and 69. I'm going to have those numbers wrong. But like, of the country didn't think either one of them were fit to be the president of the United States. Yeah. Not just I don't like them. Like, I don't think they have the moral aptitude or anything to do this. But I'm going to vote for the guy that I think is the lesser of two evils, essentially, in that. And people essentially then do that again in 2020. Yeah. They're doing it in local elections. They're doing it in Congress. And you get a bunch of people that aren't really for anything. They're just against something. And so they're like, well, I'm going to vote for the guy that's against that.
Well, I wonder too if, you think about patriotism, you think about religion.
Yeah, so religion's another one. That one went down 62 in 98, 48 in 2019, and 39 in 23, which that's been something that's been declining for a long time too. But I think you've got the same, although my argument would be that it hasn't gone down. That's just their view of organized religion with like a god involved.
Sure.
But politics has become a lot of people's religion. Some people about climate change, it's a religious.
That's right. You trade one thing for the other. Yeah. It's like you stop going to church and then you worship kind of woke society. It's like
or whatever it is. It's like it might be
the altar of
be a single issue, but you've got some God-shaped hole in you that you're going like, but now climate change is now my religion, which is probably like the having children thing.
Having children.
59% say this is very important to them in 1998, 43 in 2019 to 30 in 23. That's scary.
That is. And it looks like, we were talking about this earlier, but it looks like some of these countries like Japan, right, where there's just been this dearth of childbearing, and you have a nation now that's filled with septuagenarians, octogenarians.
And they're not even getting. I'm going to get these wrong too, but I will put it in the show notes if I can find them. It's something like. It was something like 40% of guys 25 and younger in Japan have never been on a date.
Oh, dude.
And it was not that far behind for the women. It was something like 30%.
Well, that's what this isn't in these notes, but
we're happy with it. Like, they're fine. Like that, they've chosen a life of like solitude almost. But it's like, that's
anime.
Okay.
It's anime and video games.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
You see the numbers. It's not in this poll, but it's like. Teenagers are having sex or having less sex. And I think teenagers, adults.
It's a two-edged sword. It's like, good. Teenagers probably shouldn't be.
Yeah, for sure.
Idiots.
It's like I wouldn't say the alternative is there's success there, but when you see a dramatic behavioral shift like that, you have to say, okay, like you said, you're replacing one thing with another. It's not like. And I can guarantee you, it's not that a wave of like purity or chastity is like. No,
I don't think that's what it is. No,
Gen Z or whatever. I think the thing that's interesting here, and a theory I think that I kind of have on this is one, because there's got to be there's probably a word for this or kind of a theoretical principle, but when everyone has a platform. When everyone has a voice, it kind of like drowns out all voices, right? And so,
everyone's special and unique.
Everyone's got a podcast, It's like it is. We're all
guilty.
This one's different though.
I've got two though, so does that count?
You're making it, man.
Does that make it better?
You're an influencer.
No, that's not true.
But I feel like I genuinely believe that people don't believe that they matter anymore. Their voice matters. And so it's oddly juxtaposed in this idea where I've been told that what you say should be said. In a sense, it's like we've been told for a long time now with social media that our voices matter more than ever. So start your podcast, do the influencer thing, do this, do that, do whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's interfacing with that reality and realizing you get on, you see all these consultants, everyone's writing a book, everyone's doing this thing. And I've felt the anxiety at times, like, dude, I need to write a book. I need to start a course or something.
I don't understand how people do write books. As a musician, it doesn't make sense to me. I was like, songs, I get it. Books, I don't understand how you sit down and go like, I'm going to write this thing that's 400 pages long.
I wonder now, everything's a business. Everything's a business idea. It's like, I would love to see the numbers on who's actually writing books, just for self-entertainment or like self-betterment. Like, almost everything we do now is to be marketed. You see some of these guys, we see pastors and different deal where it's like they're putting out this new thing for their son. Hey, this is a journey to manhood thing,
right. Yeah.
And I'm going to document like fathering my son.
Yeah.
And then we're going to put it into a book and we're going to sell it to you guys. And like the joke in our friend group is always like, what does that son feel about the fact that like everything he's doing with his dad on their like
has to be something that we're selling
their
later.
big hike or whatever is like, he's like, all right, guys, we're going to just did this, the boys in the background. He's like, this is going to crush, he's like making a video. His son's like, Dad, thanks for coming on my trip, before I go to school. But
it is weird how, social media has so many problems. It's such a weird thing for me to not wrap my head around. It's just, I can't figure out what I like or don't like about it. I know what I like and don't like about it, but I can't figure out if it's a good or a bad.
But you can't escape it, right?
Because there are some things that like you can't. It's amazing to be able to have direct access to like writers and thinkers and people that I admire for the books they write or whatever. But I get to see their like real time thoughts on.
For sure.
It could be a basketball game. Yeah. That's interesting to me that you get to see that kind of, when it truly is kind of unfiltered, it really is like their personality just coming through. But I don't think most people do that on social media. I think most people are giving this kind of fake version of themselves, or this kind of like, clean's not the right word, but some sort of like,
it's refined. It's
refined.
It's whitewashed, or it's modeled. We had some
what I think you want me to say.
That's right.
Is what it is.
Or, simply, you have an ideal version of yourself.
Yeah.
And we do this off of social media too, but it's like you have an idea of who you are or who you want to be. Social media allows you to kind of curate that idea, but in a lot of ways, it's false, or it's polished. And we had some friends years ago that were very designy, and I get so. I'm going to make a point here in a second about this, and I have a question for you on it, because it really irritates me, but it's also necessary, there are, you look at someone's Instagram that's a photographer or whatever, or they have a skill. It's just like, I can take a picture, I can try my hardest to take a cool picture, and it looks stupid. And there's some people that I'm
not a photographer.
I'm like, you just took a picture of a brick wall with like a sliver of a neon sign, and that looks like it's like a unsplash, something, but so there's obviously, there are people that are good at that, and they do a certain thing, and they curate their life, they curate their feed, and you get on Instagram and you're like, maybe it's jealousy. It irritates me. I see this stuff. I'm like, it's too perfect. This is just just a thing, but it's also necessary, because you can't withdraw from the world of influence. You can become a hermit or whatever. But that's kind of my question is, and I'll bring it around to music, since you're a musician, whether it's photography, whether it's music, whatever. I know a couple people in maybe extended circles who are not good musicians, but they're putting content out. They're putting music out. They're recording. They're doing shows. They're pumping stuff out. And in the debate amongst internal family and friends is like, is that a good thing to do? Is it a good thing to put content out? I think through the terms of like economic value added, like EVA, which is a business metric, which is like, are you contributing positively to the economy?
Side note, Jacob's getting his master's in some sort of business economics.
It's finance.
Finance. Yeah. Okay. So into knowing terms like this.
Everything's an Excel function for me right now. But it's like, I think with people like that, the question that's interesting with social media is it, are you creating value or destroying value by putting garbage out? And is that completely subjective? What could be garbage to you is like art to me.
It's really tricky on that, because that kind of brings, what's interesting about that is that I think that most of the answers to this is because we're kind of obsessed with ourselves. I think that's the main answer here, because the only one that went up is money.
Yeah.
So the only one that goes up is money. So community involvement goes down, which means I'm more important than the community. Mm-hmm. Religion goes down. I'm more important than God. Patriotism, I'm more important than my country. Yeah. Having children, I'm more important than, because you have to talk about dying to self is having kids. Without a doubt. And I think it's the most important job I've got.
Right.
Basically. But it's hard, and you cannot be selfish. You're not going to be a good parent if you're selfish. That's just, you have to let go of some of that. So, I think that is part of the reason. That's a good tie-in, because I think the reason most of these things go down is because it's this obsession with yourself. So what's weird about social media is that it depends on how seriously you take it, I think. Right. Because if I I'm terrible as a musician. I love creating stuff and I hate promoting it. I just hate talking about myself. Yeah. It's not something I'm good at. I've never been good at. I was fine when I was in a band because it felt like a community. Yeah, it was like, and I wasn't writing the songs either. So it felt really very much like, this is good stuff. Like slinging those CDs outside of shows was easy. But like my stuff, I will record and I like nitpick it to death. I think it's pretty good. And then I'm like really bad about putting it out there. So in some ways I admire the people that put it out there. Cause I'm like, hey, at least you're like doing something. And the inevitable problem with the internet is just that as everyone can put out an album by themselves or make a movie by themselves or a podcast or YouTube or whatever it is, you do get more junk and white noise that you have to sift through.
Right.
But there's also some stuff that you just never would have had access to with the traditional labels with music or studios with movies, or there are YouTube channels that are doing way cooler stuff than you know, some of my favorite stuff. Like I'll watch everything they put out because it's incredibly creative. It's these amazing long form, like, you know, movie reviews or something like that. And I love them because, and like, you just would not have that without the internet and social media. So just those things to me are like, okay, worth it sometimes.
For sure.
But there's a lot of negative downsides, which is, I think, mostly reflected in these opinions of people thinking that religion, patriotism, having children, community involvement are not important to them. And not just not important. We're talking like sub 30% of people saying that's kind of, I think and I mean, honestly, the having children stuff and community involvement, I think that the reason people have turned to politics is because they don't have bowling leagues and they don't have softball leagues and they don't have the local whatever, Shriner place or what. I mean, just like these things mattered. I think that they were the thing that made.
Well, you knew where you fit in society, and like that's the piece to, you know, within the social media context is social media is a way for us. We're striving to fit in.
Yeah.
Right. We're striving to have a place and know who we are within the broader context of society, and so
it feels like we're trying to fit in with like too big of a group of people.
Yeah, no, it obviously doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I think I think that's where so much of the anxiety, so much of the confusion comes in, is we don't know how. It's kind of like we're playing with this thing, this tool that is hurting us, but we don't know how to use it well. It's like you know, playing with fire in a sense. It's like, you know, before someone realized, hey, I can use this to cook food or do whatever. It's like
warmth.
You know, it's like,
without the 3rd-degree burns. Yeah.
You know, and so it's like we're trying to figure that piece out. And so like fundamentally to the issue here with these deals, there seems to be a question that we have, and whether it's kind of nihilism, social nihilism, which is like, I don't matter, and so I don't care anymore. I think the pandemic, for sure, people just dropped out of society. They're just like, I'm done. I'm done with friends. I'm done with trying. I'm done with caring. You know, in the world, in a lot of ways, shifted too. It's like, you know, all of the metrics, shopping online, working from home, all of these things. We shifted to and haven't shifted all the way back.
Especially in COVID, right? I mean, like that was like such a accelerator pedal for all of this. Like I think we were heading in this direction clearly.
Yeah.
You look at these, I mean, these numbers are all, you know, they take it in 98, they take it in 2019. I assume they've been taking this for a long time, obviously. And so it's down already in 2019, but obviously COVID's just like a gigantic brick on the gas pedal that made all of this worse.
Yeah, if it was already headed in that direction, maybe that's where such the steep drop off happened. Yeah, because you're right. It was already moving in a certain direction, and that theory would be strengthened by the one that the community involvement. Because it's like, well, here's one that's going up, and money, even though money's going up and has stayed up, all of them have dropped from their trajectory in some sense. Even money levels out a little bit. Yeah. So,
it's not climbing as steeply post 2019 because it goes from 41 to 43, where it goes from 31 to 41, which is still the least change in any of the rest of these, because every one of these is like at least 20 points. Most of them are 40.
And it makes sense. Like you have a global pandemic where we watch millions of people die. We sit inside for months. You know, life for the most part. And I mean,
and social media becomes the only
That's right.
social kind of thing.
That's right.
Essentially, for a lot of people,
there was such a fundamental shift in, I think, people's identity. So what's interesting is, sorry, I have a.
That's fine.
What's interesting is, if social media has kind of created this this identity, or this kind of like, it's this disassociative fugue almost of like, I don't know who I am, and I'm trying to be something. I'm trying to be validated.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out the last thing you want to do is figure out who you are by how many likes or impressions you get. You know what I mean?
But that is the dopamine.
That is the thing, though.
That's the thing.
But you know, it would be interesting to see if we were to really find that truth of who we were, and social media has been an attempt to do that, if these numbers would come up, because I think with a greater sense of identity, a greater sense of what you believe in, and really understanding your own value, and responsibility. For me, what's missing here too is like individual responsibility.
Oh, that's just gone.
Our parents' generation, grandparents, it was like you were part of something bigger.
Yeah.
And you didn't get the consolation prize just for being there.
No.
You didn't get like the passing grade just for showing up. And that's my big thing right now. Is like we've kind of lost personal responsibility for what you believe in, how you act, all of these things.
That's right. Honestly, I mean, it becomes the only form of that exists now is cancel culture.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, you said the wrong thing, we're going to get you fired from a job, which I don't think is the same thing. It's not the same thing as a personal responsibility, because I don't think that's I don't think this mob mentality thing is something we should follow. I think people are generally stupid in herds.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, you're right. It's just gone. It's like, and you even see that in the defense of your own side. So if you are, to me, there's such a difference between someone who voted for Trump and someone that defends everything Trump has ever done or said or whatever. And if you can't find a negative thing to say about Donald Trump, or pick the other side, like you can't find a negative thing to say about Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton, or pick any politician, and you can't find a negative thing to say about them, like you're also abdicating personal responsibility for those people.
That's right.
Because if your side won't hold them accountable, then no one else is going to.
Can you be successful though? Like let's say this podcast really blew up and you were encouraged to step into the scene, whatever that means, right?
Right.
Can you be successful with the way the landscape is now, as call it a rising thought leader in politics?
Oh my God.
Maybe that's attributing too
hilarious.
much. But can you be successful without picking the side and trumpeting the narrative? And because that's what we see with Kirk and Owens and some of these other guys, is you get in and it's almost like, for me, it's like you go to the casino.
Yeah.
You go to the casino and you play the slot machines and you lose your money. But like, imagine a slot, every time you put something in and press the button, like money comes out, you're going to play that game.
Yeah.
And so these guys realize like, hey, or imagine another game where you put money in and then like you lose it and then they kick you out, know? And so it's like, you're not going to play that one. And so you have these people that are like, well, they start out fresh and then they just kind of go to that side because that's what pays and that's what keeps you playing.
I think the trick there is that those people were successful, and like, for example, like those are both people that I like some of the stuff they did several years ago, and then they just went too all in on that slot machine that guarantees them the money,
right?
Because it makes them more money. It's not that they weren't making money before; it's that you can make more money. And Fox News did the same thing. Like Fox News was already the most successful cable news by a long shot, and MSNBC basically realized, okay, we should just do what they do. We will still not be in first place, but we'll make a lot more money than we are right now.
Yeah.
And they did, and that's why they embraced it. And then Fox went even, like, Fox used to literally just be like, hey, we're going to have some conservatives on here. I mean, that was crazy thing that Fox did in the 90s, was like, we're going to let conservatives on television.
Yeah.
And people thought it was crazy. I loved Fox News in like the 90s and early 2000s. I mean, as far as like, you could actually, I think the news side of Fox was better than all the other cable news stuff, as far as like the news side. Opinion side, I like some of the stuff too, but then,
well, news was actually I mean, it was still biased to some degree, but it's like it was far more relevant, far more trustworthy than it is now with the inception, I feel like, of quote unquote fake news. And that was really an idea or a thing that in the last 15 years has come in where you can't believe anything you read. And so
you really can't. I mean, you have to check a second source. You literally, every single story you ever read, even the fluffy stuff, like the thing this week was the Florida, which, you know, who knows when this releases, so this might be old at that point, but the Florida school that, like, the story is the principal got fired because some parents complained about showing the statue of David in a Renaissance art class, right? Well, then, like, you know, I read an article that dug into it a little more, and it was like, no, the principal had several other problems, and then the straw that broke the camel's back was they were supposed to notify the student, the parents of the students about it, to be like, hey, we're doing this thing, blah, blah, blah. And they didn't do that part, you know? And so, and then there was some quip about, like, the teacher said something specific, like made a little offhand joke at first. It was like, it's non-pornographic. And so now you've got an 11-year-old asking their parent, like, what's pornographic? And my teacher told me not to tell my parents. And it was all a joke, but it just went wrong. Like, and it was 3 parents, and 2 of them were only upset about, they were just asking questions like, oh, I mean, I didn't get, like, they weren't like fire anyone or whatever. So, like, that story is not the same story. Right now it's this culture war thing, and so the left jumps on it because it's this perfect example of Florida, like, you know, they're now, I mean, I think a lot of these laws in Florida are ridiculous because they're anti-free speech, and I mean, I think there's all sorts of problems. I'm not defending the laws, but I am defending the fact that story is not really telling the whole story. And that's everything now. It's just, but the problem is that it's like we have rewarded that. And the reason you see that story, I saw it 30 times today in my little news feed from 30 different outlets, because it works. It works. People click on it and they make money, and then that's it. What the whole thing is.
That's the thing. And you think it's funny, like, you get some of these, like, insidious, you know, tech theories, as, you know, the big 4, whatever, like, kind of like weaving their evil into our lives or whatever. But, like, so much of this stuff, even the polarized viewpoints, is a result of algorithms.
Right. It's because people are people. This is why all of it is really our fault as the people. Because if you can't, that algorithm is not programmed to serve up the hateful content to you. It is just programmed to send you the stuff that you will click on or look at for longer and keeps your attention. And that's what's keeping people's attention. So therefore it feeds the algorithm to do that. They didn't design it to be like, I mean, there's some of that. Yes, there is some of that. There's some of that. But for the most part, if everyone just started not doing that, it would reward the content.
Sure.
But we're asking for the stuff that's like,
and I thought of that when you talked about news. It's like Twitter. I got on Twitter. I've never really gotten into it, but over the last year or so, I've gotten into it like people did in like 2009 or whatever.
And that's when I was like into it.
Right. So it's like I'm a late bloomer, but
that's fine.
But I got on it because this idea of like, well, hey, here is some trustworthy media, because it's not well, and again, it has been historically, there's been manipulation, but the idea of like, I can curate a feed of independent voices that aren't on a media payroll
without even an editor between them and me, which is super cool.
It is cool. But then I also realize the more I have a tendency to like and follow people who I agree with. And so, you know,
as do almost everyone else. So it's fine. I mean, like, that happens. But
and I will say, I have kept, there's a couple people on Facebook that I have as friends. One guy in particular who were probably very similar in terms of intellect and curiosity and some of these things, very different viewpoints. I probably like his posts because he's hilarious, but he puts up the best memes. But I have kept him as a friend, even though the stuff he posts, I patently disagree with most of the time.
Right, because I mean, I do think it's ridiculous that people think they can't be friends with people they disagree with, which is, I think, is boring. I mean, most of my friends are liberal. Just I was in a band, for goodness sake. I mean, like you
can't be in music.
You can't be in music and not. So I mean, but I think it would be boring to only have friends that thought exactly like me. I realize that on social media it's a little bit different because I do have some people I really like that I've stopped following because I was like, I'm going to stop liking you as a person.
For sure.
Not because of the ideas they're posting, but the way, like the tone of it. There's some just real gross stuff.
No, yeah, I mean, I get that. It's hard. You look at someone that is just beating on the drum for a specific issue that's counter to your viewpoint. It is hard to stay engaged and see that on the feed. And I think some of that's natural. It's just intrinsic to how we want to be around people we identify with. But then a lot of it too is just a system we're involved in. And so I guess my question would be with traditional values, because this is concerning to me, and it should be more concerning than it probably is for most people.
Well, we could do an entire episode about how the children thing is like so dangerous,
the next one.
like economically, and there's all sorts of things that are really scary about that. I mean, the rest of it is weird too, and I don't, like I said, I think most of it, like you said, just been replaced by something else. I think that
it's been replaced with us. It's been replaced with me
and my side, my tribe or whatever. Like, but it's mostly just me. It's just one person. So, I mean, going back to your question about, like, can you do it? I think the trick with Twitter and any social media and really any media kind of thing. So, I mean, as people become a brand or whatever kind of thing like that, the older people are fine, if you've noticed, because they already figured out who they were.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying there's some charlatans there too. There's some people that realize they can make way more money. God, look at Rudy Giuliani. That guy was like America's mayor, and turned around New York City, and now he's a loon, right? I mean, he's just like the before times of Rudy Giuliani.
He's got hair dye dripping down.
Now I think he might just actually have lost his mind. I don't know if that was so much a money grab, but I mean, there are people like that, obviously. But there's a lot of the people I followed on Twitter were already like established writers or thinkers or whatever, and so they didn't change the way they talked. It was just you had this direct connection to them where they could tweet something. I mean, I've had conversations with like musicians I adore about politics on Twitter. Well, I mean, without that, you can't do that. That's for sure. That. I mean, I'm not going to get the opportunity to like run into that guy at a bar and have a conversation about something random, But so that's the cool part of Twitter. But like, you can't change. You can't separate that. That monetization part of it, unfortunately, for most people. So, they're gonna put their coin in that slot machine, and if it pays them, but to me, you've got to decide this is what I'm gonna do, and this is who my audience is. And if people don't like that, I'm just gonna go okay. Like, then you're going after a certain cohort of audience that you think that not that they have to think just like you. Again, you don't have to be like that. But that's where I think Substack is kind of becoming the grown-up version of Twitter. Sure. And that's, you see all these journalists like Barry Weiss and Andrew Sullivan and all these people that are like leaving giant media companies like New York Times, and they're starting their own little Substack and saying, give me $100 a year, $10 a month, and you've got access to my stuff. And they're doing it independently, and they're not. In fact, I mean, those media organizations wanted them to change who they were, and they were going, no, like I'm not gonna, And to me, those are the people that people should pay attention to. And you got to pay for it. Like, but to me, it's worth $100 a year if I've got a handful of whatever specific writers that I really trust are not gonna. If you're on the right, you're not going to sugarcoat stuff or not attack people on your side. So that's why I like the Dispatch is a great one like that. They're not on Substack anymore, but similar idea. It's like, it's mostly pay to play. It's not, we're not going to do ads. We're going to because that model, I think, just didn't, unfortunately, news messed up by saying the internet came out and they're like, we're going to put everything online for free.
Yeah. Well,
and they just didn't think about the repercussions of that 20 years down the road. And so now it's like you either are clickbaity or you have to your audience is the tail wagging the dog. And the Fox News thing is a great example of that, because they're getting sued. And in the deposition stuff, I mean, it's like in there, it literally says, this is not Rupert Murdoch says something like, it's not red or blue, it's green. That's why we're having Mike Lindell on over and over again. It's because he buys ads on the network.
That's right.
It's about making money. And they were also concerned that their audience was going to jump to Newsmax, because they were going to peddle this stuff. If we don't, we're going to lose the audience to those people.
Yeah.
That is your audience telling you what to do instead of you informing your audience. And if the purpose of media is to inform, you're not doing your job at that point. Sure. You are pandering to your audience to tell them what they want to hear. And obviously, everyone is guilty of a bias, and everyone's guilty of kind of getting in their own little bubble of, echo chamber of sorts of saying like, well, it's obviously more pleasant to hear things I like. But you're not ever going to be able to talk about principles or the things you believe in if all you've ever heard is your side of that. Sure. And you can't argue a point back at someone. I have arguments all the time with people on social media. I say all the time. I try not to argue on social media because I think it's but I do it with people I know outside of social media, and I feel comfortable, and I'll send a message. I'm not ever like doing this in a public thing. But I've literally, I had a friend that one time posted something about like, hey, the only reason you could possibly be pro-choice is that you hate women or hate black people. Oh, and so I just wrote him back and I was like, hey, I mean, most of the pro-life movement is women. It's driven by women. So are you saying that all of them hate women?
Yeah, right.
And then I was like, and what about the fact that, 80-something% of abortions are black? There would be way more black people if there was less abortion. That's the truth. I mean, the population would be higher. So what if someone was a black woman and is pro-life, which absolutely exists? Like, what do you say to that person? And I was like, you've never thought about this, have you? And like they couldn't come back and say anything because they literally, that thought had never crossed their mind that like half the country of women are pro-choice.
Well, it's almost like you can't have a, if you don't fit kind of that narrative. Well, I'm not a black woman. I'm a white male.
Right. Yeah.
And so I either use the hot button, like generalist idea,
right,
or I don't have an opinion.
Yeah. And so I was just like, and I wasn't trying to even make a point about his point so much as saying like, what you're saying is you've not even looked at any of this data. And I was like, or actually the same friend who I like, but like one time he literally thought you could just walk into Walmart and buy a gun. Like he thought you literally walked in, which to be fair, a lot of idiots on the left, because most people that are writing for media in New York haven't even seen a pickup truck in their life.
Sure.
They've never seen, like, they don't know anything about it. And it really is an ignorance more than it is like, I think, a facetious thing. But I literally was like, texting him, I was like, dude, you have to pass a background check. Yeah. Like you can't just walk in. And he was like, really? Like he had no idea that you had to fill out a form and pass a federal background check.
No, I've seen some stuff that's like, we need to do this by guns. And it's like, that is the law.
That is what the law.
That's actually what we have to do right now.
So to me, if you are not paying attention to at least a few writers or at least going, I don't love Real Clear Politics has gotten a little bit in the weeds with some stuff, but for the most part, I like that you will have an article and an article right below it that are the opposite opinions, and you can read them both back to back. And they're sort of they're obviously curating, like, here's the two opinions we're going to put against each other. And like they lean more right. And so you're going to get a better opinion from the right than the left in that one. But it's still nice to be able to, on one page, I can click two things and see two different opinions, and I can see which one's more persuasive. Yeah. Like, who wrote the better article, who made more points, who had more facts. I mean, I can't believe how many articles I read that are like, sources say blah blah blah, and I'm like, show me the source. Like, where are those numbers? Where is the poll? Let me see the data. So where do you link to it?
Where do you think all the buzz lately has been with generative AI? Where do you think news and media as it relates to politics is going to be impacted by this emerging technology that's changing everything?
Man, that could be a whole episode too. I think that for the most part, it's not there where it can replace writers. It's great for like prompts of like, here's an idea, but it's not there where it's like,
Not today.
Not today. No, I mean, in a few years, it will be.
I mean, the leaps and bounds. I mean, did you see? It's like
it's
from
crazy.
GPT 3.5 to 4, we went from 10th percentile on the bar exam to 90th.
Yeah.
So there's
it's going to jump.
Orders of magnitude improvement.
But I think that if it doesn't change people's behavior, I don't know if it can make that big of an impact. I mean, I think that ChatGPT could write most of the crap articles that are on news organizations right now. I mean, I think it could right now. I mean, because most of it's not very good. But I just don't know. ChatGPT can't have a 20-year-old intern that's chasing down a congressional staffer to get a quote. There's just some stuff that's not going to be able to... Imagine
a program, though, some of these large language models that, like the Bing engine has access to the internet, like real time.
Yeah.
Imagine being
Which
able...
got a little sketchy on the release of it, but
Some wacky stuff, dude.
Yeah.
But imagine being able to, and I really think, and again, maybe this is a completely different episode, but I think generative AI, some of these large language models, and how, one, we don't know yet today, just how displaced so many of the practices and things we do now are going to be because of the technology. Yeah. But then you also think like, the ability to scrape the web for data, analyze, and then present as unbiased a viewpoint or as balanced a viewpoint as possible. Now, granted,
but how good is
the programmers
source?
Are going to say, well, the programmers are going to say,
source is bad. If
if the source code's biased, then it's like it doesn't really matter. But I do think the concern I have, I guess, behind all of that is we are thinking less and less for ourselves, and that's kind of the point, right? And so,
right.
And why would you? Here's the thing. Imagine you could put something in and have something kick out a song to you that no one's ever written or sung before, that's special for you to write and sing, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
Or you could tool around for hours and come up with
or years,
or years, or come up with something. Yeah. And that's where I think there is this interesting thought about, we're talking earlier about the social media deal where it's like, we're all kind of confused because you're either awesome or you're just part of the 99% of the drivel and garbage that's out there. People trying to like duplicate or ape the kind of this high content.
It's kind of already happening
for sure.
I mean, most social media accounts are just a rip off of some other social media account, or at least like it's like this is what I think you want me to be. So
people just don't the where we're headed and where this technology is going. It'll be interesting to see how you add this layer of AI onto somewhere where these numbers are trending. Where now it's kind of like this multiplier on. We're going to get productive in a lot of areas, more productive, but creative thinking's going to fall off. I think.
But do you think it will, or do you think it will open up? I think it could open up space for more creative thinking because the boring stuff, like for example, I think copywriters, or like if you're writing product descriptions for a shopping website, that job might go away because AI could do that really well. But maybe that opens up that person to actually be more of a creative writer. I don't know. I think that it could, because I don't think AI is going to be able to do the creative thing as well as like just the facts, man.
I mean, you look at some of these things like Midjourney and Dolly and stuff. You just art in general.
Yeah.
Creativity, just by its nature, is us. It's us creating something that doesn't exist, right? And so there's value. I think humans see value in it because it's a very human, it's a God-given human trait, right? It's actually, I think it's a divine trait that we model, but who cares if something can spit out, it's like a machine can create it. A machine can think for you, can tell you exactly what to believe and why to believe it and do these things. And, I don't necessarily have an opinion, so to speak, on all of that, but I do think what is in jeopardy, and probably, maybe the underlying point of all this is like, you have to know what you believe in, because we're swimming in this sea of opinion and content.
And it's not reducing in quantity.
No.
Like, that's just getting exponentially larger all the time.
Yeah.
As far as, like, the stuff you have to wade through to find whether it's you're trying to find a good band, trying to find a good movie, trying to find a good TV show, trying to find a good news article, trying to find a trustworthy news source, trying to find a good politics, whatever it is, you have to swim through a lot more muck to get to that. But I still think the internet, in all of its forms, social media, AI, any of those kind of things, will, for the most part, reveal some good stuff, but there'll just be more crap to wade through.
Yeah, sure.
But I don't know. We'll see. I mean, talk to me in 10 years and we'll figure it out. Sure. But, well, thanks for coming on.
Dude, it's fun.
Yeah, let's do it again.
Cool. Yeah, for sure.
All right, cool.
Awesome.